I am Shannon Beckham, the founder and CEO of Chief AI, and I'm so excited to be co-hosting this event with Rex from Google.
Hey everyone, I'm Rex Brown on Google's Government Affairs and Public Policy team. Great to see you all.
And it is amazing to see how many people are at this event. We met about a year ago at a conference in Denver where we were talking about government technology, and we kept saying, we're both from the Bay. We've got to bring a bigger GovTech ecosystem to San Francisco and the Bay Area. And I want to also shout out Meg Huff from our team in the back who put together this entire event from its ideation, she pitched it, to setting everything up. So let's give Meg a round of applause as well. But really, when we were going through the list of events for SF Tech Week, we found only 3 or 4 that were even remotely close to being related to civic technology. So the fact that you are all here today to talk about AI and government in San Francisco is huge. We're really excited. We're going to kick things off with Michael Lai from Anthropic, who's going to give you a few remarks on his work that he's doing there with government. And then we have an amazing panel lined up for you that Rex is going to moderate. And then we hope this becomes a space where you meet your next partner. We have government operators, and staffers, we have lobbyists, we have startup founders, technologists, everybody in the room. It's pretty incredible to see the list of people who are here. So we hope that you can use this space and stay as long as you want to just mix and mingle, and we hope some great things come out of it. So with that, we'll kick it over to Michael to say a few words.
Awesome. Hey everyone, how's it going? Let's give it up again to Shannon, Rex, and Entrepreneur First for hosting us today. Let's give it up for SF Tech Week. I'm Michael Lai by day. I lead Anthropic, Claude for Government, state and local governments, working with SF, California. I was in Singapore last week, training some engineers on Claude Code. Any Claude fans in the room? Okay, cool. And then by night, I'm involved in SF politics on the local Democratic Party. My background, I was a founder. Any founders in the room? Raise your hand. Okay. I'm sorry, / thank you for doing what you do. It's hard. So I was a founder and then realized, wow, why is San Francisco so broken? And during COVID, ended up running for office last year. One run race, sadly lost another, and in that process met some of the co-founders of Anthropic, and that's how things came about. I want to get a sense of who all is in the room as well. So we have some founders in the room. How many folks are public servants working in government? Woo! Okay, let's give it up for the public servants. Yeah. Thank you for what you do. How many folks are specifically building in GovTech, civic tech? Okay, awesome. How many folks are involved in their community or civics or politics? Awesome. Let's give it up for you all as well. Thank you all for being here. I think, quick thing I want to say is just the work that we do, one is it's focused on responsible AI to empower public servants. Some of that is working directly with governments. For example, there's a new digital democracy platform in California called Engage California that is inspired by V-Taiwan, and so Claude is powering some of that work there in California. Some of it is better benefits delivery. So we're powering, do people know about Binti? It's a GovTech platform, amazing, yeah. Shout out to Binti, incredible software for child welfare workers, and so Claude AI is powering some of their work to save caseworkers time so they can better serve children. So super excited just in general for the ecosystem though, and I think now is an especially good time to be building in GovTech with the acceleration with AI, the ability to really empower public servants, save time. And I also think now, I know it's a hard time for the public servants in the room, but you could also make so much impact as well on the inside. And I'm hoping that some of us in the room can help you all so we can ultimately serve residents and citizens better. So with that, I'll turn it over to our amazing panel. And thank you all for being here, and thanks for having me.
Awesome, thank you, Michael. So we'll grab our seats and get started. No. Yeah. Today's casual, so. All right. So Google is really honored and proud to be a part of, hopefully, this inaugural event. We can do it every year, maybe.
I'm already excited for the second annual. Great.
Right. So our team, Government Affairs at Google, we work with governments to help them understand and utilize AI. So there's cities around the United States that are using AI to do everything from detecting wildfires in near real time, flood detection. There's even cities like Memphis, Tennessee that are using AI to detect potholes efficiently in an automated way. So we also partner with organizations like US Conference of Mayors and National League of Cities. We develop guides and blueprints. So my team is really focused on helping mayors, city leaders understand how to use AI. So if that sounds interesting or of interest to you, then find me after the event. Would love to connect with you all, either on LinkedIn or here in person. Okay, so quick run of show. We're gonna have about 40 minutes of Q&A, and then we're gonna open it up for audience Q&A. And then we'll continue the conversation over food and drinks right here until about 8 o'clock, or else my car will get towed. So, all right. So tonight, I'm excited to be joined by a rockstar group of GovTech panelists. On the stage, we have perspectives from startup founders, startup operators, venture capital investors, and public sector leaders. From startups, we have Shannon Beckham, CEO of Chief AI. We have Mark Fries, COO of Rept. Woo! And from the investing side, we have Rachel Stern, founder of Govtech Ventures. And from government, we have Stephen Caines, Chief Innovation Officer and Budget Director of the City of San José. Let's give them a quick round of applause. All right, so let's jump right into it. To kick us off, I want each panelist to tell us a bit about your background, what you do, and why you are focused on the intersection of tech and government.
Okay, I'll start it off. So as you all know, I'm Shannon. And about 10 years ago, I started my career working in government, mainly federal government. I was in the White House, in Congress, in the Senate for 4 years, and then across political campaigns. And by the end of my stint, I was so frustrated with the lack of access to technology. Everything we did was manual, from scheduling to managing relationships, building briefing books. I would literally carry a printer with me from event to event across the country to print memos for a United States senator. And I just could not believe this was the best way of operating. So I went and worked in tech, and I worked for Eric Schmidt across his AI initiatives, and most recently was at Together AI, helping build and launch their first product. And after those experiences, really asked myself, what am I uniquely positioned to solve, and how can I use AI to do it? And I just felt called to bring AI back into the public sector. And so a little less than a year ago, we started Chief AI. And the premise, our mission, is to power the world's leaders. So we work with mayors, governors, congressmen, state agency heads, and also CEOs and other high-powered leaders to manage their executive offices. So we work with their chiefs of staff, their schedulers, their advisors, their teams, to do all of that manual work that they're doing each day, scheduling, relationship management, briefings, and tying it all to their goals so they can serve and create more impact in their communities. And I'll pass it off to Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. Hey, everyone. I'm Mark Fries. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Rept. Rept is short for represented. I'll tell you all about it in a second. But my background's in social media. So I actually worked at Twitter for almost 10 years. I started as an intern in charge of the softball team in the swag closet, literally the lowest person on the entire org chart of 400 people at the time. This was 2011. And worked hard, learned a lot. But one of the things that I saw firsthand was how social media was supposed to make public discourse better. It actually kind of did the opposite. In fact, it definitely did the opposite. It made it harder and much more challenging. And oftentimes the collateral damage for that is local governments who are trying to do amazing work for their communities and often getting shouted down by people who don't have a full grasp of the facts, or maybe who have some kind of different agenda to spin for whatever reason. So it was an unfortunate situation, and I was thinking I can probably make a bigger impact outside of the social media machine and take those lessons and apply them in a way that's actually helpful to local governments and to our communities and to residents, which of course we all are. So that led me to join one of my Twitter buddies, Mike Baumwell, who's based in New York, to start Rept. And Rept is a video engagement platform for local governments powered by AI. And Rept is designed to humanize local government to build resident trust. And we do that through an AI-powered kind of video platform to help governments tell their stories, educate residents, and kind of add a human feel, almost like a coffee with your mayor, and scale that across their populations.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Stern. I'm the founder and managing partner of Govtech Ventures. We're a pre-seed and seed fund focused on technologies transforming state and local government. I've been living at this nexus of technology and state and local government for almost 15 years. I founded a firm called In-State Partners that took a network of lobbyists in almost every state capital and made it an asset that I sold to companies like Lyft and Zoom and Square and Hims and Hers and Bird Scooters, who were all getting big enough to be noticed by government, but not big enough internally to manage all those relationships. So covered sort of the middle 30 for them. And then started working with startup founders that needed warm introductions into state and local government through that same network. But it was about product market fit, and it was about procurement, and it was about pricing. And I fell in love with working with the early, sticky, hard stuff. And navigating how you build this really great foundation for businesses to serve and partner with governments in a way that's sustainable for everyone. So I'm raising a fund around that thesis, and I'm very excited about all the technologies that are building in this space, and to have conversations with great innovative leaders, because I think there's this unbelievable opportunity to translate between technology and government. And there's a great moment in time with AI and DOGE and a bunch of other factors at play for that fast and easy adoption.
Hey everyone, Stephen Caines. I'm so happy to be here today. The through line through my career has really been the response piece of AI, but also implementation. My background is a lawyer. I graduated with a concentration in the business of innovation, law, and technology. I specifically focused on digital privacy through working with organizations like the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, which combats cyber sexual harassment through legislative, technological, and community-based methods. I also worked for legal aids in Florida, specifically building online intake systems to allow clients to apply 24/7 in different languages, and also do case referrals between sister organizations. After I graduated law school, I had spent 2 years at Stanford Law School publishing research specifically around the ethics and regulation of facial recognition. Then I brought into other forms of surveillance AI. I was featured in the Oxford Handbook of AI Governance, and really what made me make the jump from academia into government is really recognizing that San Jose is an extremely special place in terms of not only leading local government norms and best practices, but not shying away from the difficult problems and making sure that they have inclusivity at the forefront of everything that they do. So although I was originally brought in to help build up their digital inclusion fund and develop their original privacy policies, 4 years later, proud to serve Mayor Mahan and be able to work on budget as well. So I feel like the perspective of budget and innovation, really excited to get into it in this conversation. But thank you so much.
Awesome. I feel very like a huge underachiever after hearing Steven's intro just now. All right, first question for Shannon. Based on your work in government and Chief AI's experience building for government customers, what are the key differences this audience should know between products designed for the public versus private sector?
I like this question because I actually do think there are a lot of key differences for building for the public sector. So let me use an example. We work with the mayor of Denver as one of our customers. And when we landed the contract with him, the first thing we did was go talk to his team and his technology services team to say, what are the requirements that you have so that we can make sure we actually get through this contracting process as fast as possible and in a way that is serving you best. And so when you're a public official, there's two things at play. One is it's really high stakes. Like if you make a mistake, it's on the news. And there's just an enormous amount of responsibility that any technology they bring in, they feel like they have. And that's secondly because they are accountable to the public and they're accountable to taxpayers. And so that also has some product implications. So as we were building with the mayor of Denver and his teams, we did a couple of things. The first was security. The security requirements in the public sector are more extreme, and you can build from the start to match those security requirements, whether it's building an AWS GovCloud or building toward knowing you need to be StateRAMP or FedRAMP certified, these other certifications. A lot of people think they can just take products built for the private sector and quickly retrofit them for the public sector, and that's just not the case. So if you're in the room and you're building, there's a lot of ways you can build from the start that set you up for success on security. The second one is Public Records Act. So Colorado has public records laws, and any citizen can call up the mayor's office and say, I want to see every single record on XYZ. And if you're a product that stores data, you have to be able to handle that and manage that correctly. And that's really different too than if you're selling to the private sector. And then the third piece I would say is keeping a human in the loop. I love being in San Francisco because we're techno-optimists, and we believe that AI is going to have such an amazing impact. But when we're traveling out to other states and cities, people are still really scared of AI. They're scared it's going to take their job. They're not familiar with how to use it, other than maybe asking ChatGPT a question. And so we are making sure that we're designing the products in a way where you don't have an agent or some AI automation in the background taking any actions without a human being aware of what is happening and making sure that they're involved in that process. So there actually have been, in this last year, we've learned a lot of ways that you build products differently for the public sector than private. And I don't know if any of you want to chime in on that either, but it's an interesting topic. Okay, great.
Awesome. Next question is for Stephen. The City of San Jose is leading the charge on AI innovation and adoption. Mayor Matt Mahan said a few months ago that he wants the City of San Jose to be the most AI-enabled city hall in the country. What have you all done differently that's enabled you to be so forward-leaning?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll spend a few sentences just giving some context on San Jose for those of you who haven't been there. But we're an hour south. We're the largest city in Northern California, extremely diverse, largest overseas Vietnamese population in the world, rich history of Mexican-American rights with Cesar Chavez, and also one of 3 remaining Japantowns in the US. And so anytime we communicate or deliver services, we really think about how can we reach our customers and ultimately our residents. In terms of Mayor Mahan's vision, I always appreciated how bold it was. A lot of the groundwork started in the previous administration as well under now Congressman Liccardo, in that he empowered us to create a set of privacy principles which morphed into privacy policies. And then when Mayor Mahan took office, we began to use specific data use protocols. So we have separate protocols for automated license plate readers versus, let's say, gunshot detection, just to ensure that we are thinking really intentionally about how can these technologies affect all these different facets of our community. Specifically, though, we have some really great projects and initiatives that we've started around transportation. We began integrating AI into our traffic signaling for buses. We've been able to reduce travel time overall by 20%. We've also been able to reduce red light delay time, the likelihood at which you hit a red light, by 15%. We've also seen increases in Spanish viewership by integrating AI into our city council meetings, which is great for opening the door for civic engagement. We also have an object detection pilot as well, as Rex mentioned, in the other jurisdiction. And we've also received funding from Toyota Mobility Foundation specifically around road safety. So they're funding our second phase, which is great. In short, though, we have great people. It's a perfect storm of having a visionary like Mayor Mahan, who is also a founder himself. He really challenges us to use the startup and agile methods in specifically policy development. We have a great IT director, Khalid Tawfiq, who literally on his first day said, Stephen, what if one day residents didn't have to report problems, but the city knew about them? And so I really applaud him for thinking about ways to not only keep the ship afloat, but make it more efficient and reduce the load and the burden specifically on residents to correct issues in their specific community. The final thing that I'll just add is we have what I call top-down innovation, which is when folks like myself or these IT directors sit down and work with companies like yourselves, but also bottom-up. And we've been very transparent with our employees that we don't know everything. So I'm very proud of our AI upskilling and our data upskilling programs, which have really yielded some significant wins in terms of just giving our employees access to tools like ChatGPT and them finding ways to implement it specifically in their own workforce. And so that's one way that we can really relay to our employees that we trust them. We want to invest in their overall expertise, even if it means that one day they'll leave the city. So I really believe that making sure that you have as many hands on the problem as possible and making sure that you design for inclusivity is really one of the keys and the secret sauces to our success.
Awesome. Mayor Mahan better watch his back. Stephen is coming. Sheesh. All right. Next question is for Rachel. So we saw earlier there's a good number of startup founders, prospective startup founders in the room. What trends are you seeing in the GovTech space? Is there really more investment and value being created right now than 5 years ago? Help us distinguish what's real from the noise.
Yeah, I think that for government buyers, there probably is a lot more value being created right now with the capabilities of AI, because you're able to come in across huge siloed data stacks and decision-making capabilities and things in filing cabinets and suddenly have insights across a lot of your different operations. So technologically, I think from a buyer perspective, there's nothing but greenfield right now. For people building in the space, I think there's a couple of things to keep an eye out for. Everyone has AI as part of their capabilities right now. I don't find the most successful companies that are selling into state and local government necessarily lead with being an AI company. They tend to lead with the problem that they're solving, and AI helps them accomplish that. And I think that's a little bit of a marketing switch, right? It's all sort of the same product and it's all sort of the same company. But the reality is that in my experience, government buyers are looking to work with vendors and companies, who they know and who they trust, and who know the problem set well enough that they're really solving for a day-to-day challenge. And they're really solving for the operational specificity of that day-to-day challenge. And AI can enable that, but what that means is that in the private markets and the investment markets, GovTech companies are not getting the same multiples as AI companies, even though there is an AI nativity to a lot of those companies. And so when you're raising money in a state and local GovTech field with state and local GovTech investors, strategics, The multiples are not going to be 100x. If you're a pre-seed company, we want to see sort of a top of the market $10 million cap. And I'm happy to have a longer conversation with any of you about why that's actually very strategic for you, because it sets you up for the ability to raise money sooner than if you set a $20 or a $30 million cap, which is what we're starting to see in some of these AI sort of San Francisco multiples, but a relatively conservative cap as you're starting to raise money. And then when you get into the price rounds, you start to see really nice multiples, sort of 8 to 15x, depending on how conservative you've been and how little sort of money you've taken on. But I think coming into this space, assuming that GovTech is the same as B2B SaaS in terms of its ability and capacity to buy AI and find value in AI, the value of GovTech is in these relationships and is in these contracts and is in their stickiness and in your ability to scale between different government buyers without necessarily having to multiply your singular self by going to every one of the 5,000 cities or every one of the 50 states. So as you're building, just conceptualize, you're building for a really nice multiple when you reach a certain level, but being conservative early, even if you have AI in your tech stack, will serve you well as a GovTech founder.
All right, moving to Mark. How do you approach building trust and credibility with government agencies?
Yeah, something that Shannon said in her earlier answer to a question kind of landed with me, just how grateful we are to be in San Francisco, which is so tech-friendly and so optimistic about what technology can do. Every May, I fly down to Orange Beach, Alabama, which is a city on the southern kind of Gulf Coast of Alabama. It's like white sand beaches, which is not what you think when you think of Alabama. And I go there every May for the City Managers Conference for the entire state. It's the Alabama City Conference. And to say there's some trepidation around AI in places like Alabama compared to San Francisco, California, et cetera, it's an understatement. They're terrified of it, but know they need to be on board. I had somebody refer to our AI platform as a he the other day. He's telling me I can't pay my water bill using this system. So just to give you a sense of, there really is a lot of trepidation around, can we trust this thing? Should we adopt it? What's inbounds? What's out of bounds? And in terms of building that trust, I think it's different based on building it within government agencies versus building it for the public, because the fear factors are different, right? For governments, the fear comes from risk. It's, I don't want this to tell people the wrong thing. I don't want this to make an error. I don't want to get sued, right? Honestly, that's a big part of it, is just the legal implications of trusting a technology that seems like it's all-knowing when it's actually not, right? It can be great, but it's not necessarily all-knowing. So in those circumstances, I think it's all about setting expectations and aligning clearly on what AI can and cannot do, and what it should and should not do in your government, right? The phrase that I use is trust but verify, right? AI is wonderful for giving you your first draft of something. It cannot be trusted with your final draft, sight unseen, zero. You mentioned human touch points. Crucial, absolutely crucial. It's great for AI to do 90% of the work for you. It shouldn't do 100%. And I think even though the phrase trust but verify is not new, that's been around for a long time. I think when governments hear that and adopt that approach, okay, we're going to use it, but we're all agreeing to double check this, and it's built-in training and all that kind of stuff, it really actually lands even in places that are more tech averse, like Orange Beach, Alabama. So that's kind of the key I've found on the government side. On the resident side, the fear is not about the risks in being sued. It's about being ignored or marginalized or just basically muted, right? They don't want their concerns automated. And I think when residents hear, oh, we're adopting an AI tool, they think, cool, now I'm not going to be able to get in touch with the people running the city. I'm going to be sidelined with a customer service bot, which nobody wants, right? If you've ever been on the phone for customer service, it's talk to an agent. I've heard you can swear and then they detect the anger and they give you to an agent immediately. So that's a hack. But I have tried it and it didn't work for me. I just looked like an asshole. Anyway, so for residents, it's a totally different fear. It's, I don't want to be sidelined. And the entire approach, and this is what we kind of really recommend at Rept is humanizing local government, right? Because that's what allows residents to believe governments don't care. It's because they don't think about governments as groups of people who live there, your neighbors, right? They think about rules, buildings, red tape, and inefficiency when the opposite is true. Spend a few minutes with Steven and you'll learn people are in this field because they really genuinely care. And when you can showcase that, and our focus is kind of short video, we think that's a really effective medium to showcase the humanity of these governments and how hard they're working and all the progress they're making. That does a really amazing job of building trust with residents because it's, hey, we're adopting these tools to be more present with you. It saves us time from the back office stuff so we can be with you more. That's not the initial impression residents get, but it's the impression cities and governments should create to get more resident buy-in.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I think that something Mark and Shannon do, this is for a lot of the founders in the room, is that they go and they meet governments in person. And that can be really capital intensive if you're just starting something to meet all of your customers, right? They're spread out all over the place. And I cannot recommend going to conferences enough. The one-to-many motion is crucial for early stage GovTech, and these two are experts at it. They know how to work a room, they know which booths to have, they know who they're targeting, they understand their customer buyer enough to be in the spaces where their buyers are. And I think that ends up saving a tremendous amount of money for companies, but it also builds the relationship. People want to see, they want to look you in the eyes and know you're not going to screw them and get them in trouble, and that they have someone to call if something goes sideways, and they have a safety net. And so being in person, that one-to-many motion, I think is really, really, really important, and these two are great at it.
Thanks, Rachel. Say.
All right, next question is for Shannon. Shannon, what advice do you have for operators and founders in the audience who are interested in working with government, but they have the perception that government is either too slow or too bureaucratic?
Yes. Well, when I got to the Bay Area 3 years ago, I started telling people, oh yes, I want to build tech for government. And everybody would say, why would you want to do that? And ChatGPT hadn't come out yet. Doge wasn't in the news every day. There weren't all of these tailwinds around GovTech. And I was like, because the federal government is the largest employer in the United States, and why are we not building for them? And so I actually think now is a better time than we've ever seen to build in GovTech. Now I tell people I'm building GovTech, or look at everybody who's at this event, and they're like, oh yeah, of course you are, that's great, Have you read our thesis we came out with last month? And you're like, well, 3 years ago, you were not on this train. So I think it's actually an amazing time. And so my advice is just lean in. Where there's bigger barriers to entry, there's also bigger opportunity. And I think that government has a huge moat. When you are with and partnering with people, they stick with you because they know you. And then I think just to build on what they were saying about trust, it's all about trust. And so my second piece of advice is just find your champion. When you go out and you meet people in person and you're in their offices, ask to shadow them for a day. Watch literally how they're if you're building a product, technology, software, watch how they're clicking through every file, everything on the computer, how many clicks that's taking them. And you're like, wow, that took you 2 hours and I could build you something that does it in 2 minutes. And then build it and show it to them. And I think that you'll have your champions then. Rex and I started talking in because he was like, Shannon, the mayor of Denver is walking around the US Conference of Mayors saying hey, have you heard of Chief? Is anyone using Chief? And I was like, I didn't even know he was saying that, and that's incredible. So I am just so grateful to work with people who are willing to take that risk with a pilot and build trust and do that. And I have found that governments at the state, local, and federal level are more willing to do that now than ever.
Yeah, Denver Mayor Mike Johnson that Shannon just mentioned, he's one of the most progressive tech optimists in the entire country, but there's research that shows that 98% of mayors want to use AI, but a very small percent have actually started using it. So there is a big, adoption curve that I think a lot of the folks in the room can help solve.
That might be, just to build on that, education is a huge part of what we do when we're out with governments as well. So somebody called Michael and I a vendor earlier, and we were like, vendor? I've never used that term for myself. We are a partner with these government staffers and teams. And I think if you are able to sit there and also teach them how to do things, we work with a lot of schedulers. They have been scheduling in these jobs for 30 years, and learning a new system is really intimidating. So I think if you can be there and also bridge the gap on here's how you can use the tech, here's how you can procure the tech. You can look at, San Jose for guidelines on how their city did it and bring that to your city, then that really helps too.
So Stephen, jumping back to the government side, what role do governments have in ensuring that there is responsible innovation when it comes to AI implementation? And what role does industry have to support government in that responsible innovation?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think there's an explicit role and an implicit role. Explicitly, thanks to Shannon for that shout out, we have a group called the GovAI Coalition, which was started 2 years ago and has now grown to over 850 public agencies. We're having our next in-person conference in San Jose next month, November 5th through 6th. But essentially, the first question we asked ourselves is how can we package our years of expertise and make it available to our fellow public agencies? And the first phase was really around procurement. And the real challenge that we had was just really thinking, if you can't procure the technology, you can't use it. And so we were able to create things like a vendor AI fact sheet, which gives ammunition just a clear guidance to folks like myself as to what questions should you be asking about an AI system. So should you be going to an Alabama or a place that may not have the long history of investment specifically here, you can really just take a lot of the work that we've already done, amend it for your situation, your jurisdiction, your residents, and really start running with it. The second phase, which is much more exciting in my opinion, is when we actually started building things together. So we actually have an AI model that we built together using data from 9 cities, 27,000 language translation pairs. And so being able to share training data, whether it's about this or object detection, we're really thinking about ways that instead of governments building 100 different models, we can all coalesce, come together, and build something. And so we have really seen adoption by the private industry. Some folks have actually published their vendor AI fact sheet publicly, like Polymorphic as an example. And it's really exciting to see folks not only embrace our tools, but also change standards and practices. Implicitly, though, one exciting program that we just had was the San Jose AI Incentive Program. For context, San Jose, we're obviously home to major institutional companies like Adobe, Zoom, Cisco, but we also have 91 venture-backed companies that have collectively raised $5.9 billion. And so it's partly my role to make sure that we not only get to know those customers and those people building, but also ensure that that number continues to increase. And so we had a great pilot with Beam. I believe Marjorie Reed is here somewhere. They were gracious to give us an amazing pilot for around 6 months to actually run this. And so we gave essentially away 3 $50,000 grants and 1 $25,000 grants to early stage startups. We had 170 companies apply from across the country. And the idea here is not that we pick the next unicorn. We don't think government's best suited to do that, even though we had a really great external selection committee. It was really knowing these people and what problems are they trying to solve, how much have they raised, what's their technical advantage. And that's really things that we can take to really develop a tailored solution. The reason why I connect it back to best practices and responsible use, though, is one of the parameters was what is the benefit to San Jose residents? And we really had a very broad definition of that. And so the 4 companies we chose, just to quickly shout them out, one was Alethea, which is focused on maternal health. They have a voice AI that's helping to reach last mile, high risk expected mothers. Second was a company called Satellite, which specifically uses the underutilized capacity of satellites for computational infrastructure. So instead of thinking of terrestrial data centers, what capacity is there in satellites that we can use for computational models? The third was specifically, wow, I cannot believe I'm blanking on this right now. It was, apologies, I'll come back to that.
Come back to it.
Thank you.
Find them online.
Apologies. But all this to say, I think that governments have a way of upholding and really shining a light on specific companies that have that specific value. And so I'd like to think that as these jurisdictions want to support and grow their economic development locally, we have a role to play in highlighting and uplifting some of those companies that are solving our greatest challenges.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This is a question for you, which is that as companies think about partnering with cities or with counties, there's a lot of conversation around free pilots versus paid pilots. How do you weigh those two things? Fantastic when people give things away for free. If a company can't give something away for free, or just how do you weigh that in terms of your vendor selection and how you think about partnering with companies?
Great question. I would always encourage folks to have a robust understanding of how does budgeting happen in the city that you're pitching to. We are on an annual basis. We typically run January to June. And so if you're hitting up in March, it's probably too late for that year unless you want to do a free pilot. The most magic we can work is honestly if you contact us almost a year in advance for the cycle that you want to get into. That will allow us to circulate that with our internal stakeholders, get buy-in from not only IT, but also I think many people neglect to think that, oh, it's just the IT department that has to say yes. There's often the city attorney's office, and I've seen deals fall apart just because of the indemnity clauses or other kind of negotiating parameters that are not even about the technology, but it's all just about the how specifically. There's also the purchasing department. How did we structure this purchasing agreement? Does it need to be competitive if it's over a certain threshold? I think there's a lot of nuances specifically as to how governments operate, and they're all slightly different. And so it's really important to understand that. Another piece that I would add is that in City of San Jose, the mayor is actually instructed by charter to lead the budget process. So understanding the role that the elected elected officials play, knowing if the person that you're talking to actually has the authority to not even just say yes, but also move the ball forward is extremely critical. So when we think about pilots specifically, I think if it's an untested partner who has not specifically
Thank you.
worked in government before, I would think that at times we would try to push for a free pilot. But if there's times when you've also already demonstrated that you've shown value, and I can pick up the phone and call my colleague in another city, like let's say Cleveland, and they vouch for you, I think we're much more willing to actually pay for those services. So understand your track record, understand what impediments that we may have, and really just try to lower that risk barrier to the comments that my colleagues were sharing here.
Thank you.
One super
Yeah,
quick
do
thing.
it.
One thing when Stephen, you were describing kind of the partnership with 9 other cities, that's amazing you guys are doing that. And it sparked a thought. One of the beautiful things about government and GovTech is how everyone's kind of on the same team, right? Like everyone's kind of rooting for each other. If something's working in San Jose, then San Jose is going to want Milpitas and Sunnyvale to learn these things, right? And start applying them. In the private sector, you don't share your secrets with your competitor. You try and kill your competitor, right? So it's actually kind of a beautiful thing where it's a very referable market where things that work spread really quickly because your customers want them to spread. They don't want to keep a tightly guarded secret. It's just one benefit as you think about the cost benefit analysis of building in this space and growing in this, spending your time in this space. It's a great thing about it. So, sorry.
Sorry, my brain fog cleared. I now remember the other companies. The other one is MetaFoodX, which is specifically reducing food waste by inserting cameras and AI models that can look at specifically what food restaurants have. And it's great that they've been actually able to deploy in San Jose restaurants and demonstrate they've been able to save money. And the second is Clicka, which compresses AI models to reduce their computational electricity demand. So just want to give a shout out to them. So all of them have extremely pro-social benefits, not only for the city of San Jose, but also other cities that have large minority populations and face similar challenges.
All right, next question is for Rachel. How are you seeing GovTech startups compete against companies who have frontier AI models? So we heard from Michael earlier. Anthropic obviously has Claude. How do startups think about these companies? How do they compete, differentiate? Would love to hear your thoughts.
All right. Well, Claude, plug your ears. Ignore everything I'm about to say. I think that the reality is that government officials are already using a lot of the large models in their day-to-day because it's free to everyone and they're incredibly convenient and they, it's the reason we're all using them. I think the differentiation that I see with a lot of the most successful GovTech companies is they're solving for that specific pain point that we talked about earlier, the specific process that they are trying to shorten or amend, things done on paper, things done in person, things done manually. It's much more of a niche application to AI and maybe less of a generalized application of how do I just achieve efficiencies in my day-to-day work. But that is a really big question as an investor when I look at companies and I think, okay, is this a GPT wrapper? Because the risk for me and for you as a builder is that Claude or ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of the other sort of large models change their pricing. And if you're built on a foundation that really isn't yours, you are at the whims of the market. And that to me is a tremendous risk factor and red flag when I'm looking at companies where the models really aren't your own. Do I necessarily expect you to go out and build Perplexity? No, I do not. But I think that understanding the vulnerabilities of your AI stack and building a sustainable enough tech stack around it such that if those models change, you're going to be fine, whether it's neutrality between the sources, whether it's some of your own custom code. I think that's really, really important because we're all learning in real time how big these can get, but also the confines of what they can produce for us and what we can rely on them for. So I would encourage you to really think about the competitive moat as you're building in addition to those because we all love them, but it's hard to know when and how we will be able to use them 5 or 10 years from now. They'll always be free, says Claude. For everyone in this room. Yeah, $20 off for everyone. What are you promising? Yeah, go for it, please.
I was just going to say one quick thing, which is mostly how we think about it is in partnership, because there's sort of like Claude.ai or ChatGPT, right? That's different. Then there's the API. Almost all of our business is API. And so we are really excited to empower tech companies and tech companies, things like that, and we don't want to verticalize into some of those specific domains. been to New York, a little bit of open gov, I know is in the room, do cool stuff, or an ed tech like school.ai, magic school, and I'm doing these things. That's the thing that I would say is that, and I think from a pricing perspective, my guess is that the economics of the industry are going to keep pushing pricing down.
Yeah.
The frontier of intelligence is probably going to stay pretty constant pricing, but the pricing latency continues to go down and down. So that would be my take. I think the load's actually a lot higher in Govtech or EdTech than it would be in other, like there's companies like Cursor and others like that are more so wrappers in spaces where that have less defensibility, I would say.
Yeah.
But that's just my take.
I think that's exactly right, and it goes back to the defensibility of GovTech, which is really your relationships and the lack of churn, right? When a government decides to partner with a company, it's because it's solving a really integral problem for them, and they don't necessarily want to go find the cheaper version of that. They want the tool that's going to solve that for them, and then they want to move on to one of the other 500 things that are on fire. And so I agree. I think the verticalized relationships and processes that are specific to government ends up being the competitive moat, and I would encourage relative neutrality as you're building across the different systems.
Awesome.
Don't
All
get
right.
mad, don't get rid of my account.
All right, so we have 2 more questions left for the panel. So start getting your audience questions ready. We'll have Mega run a mic to anyone who has a question in a few minutes. But let's get to our last 2 questions. So we're going to pivot a little bit. We haven't talked about budget cuts. A lot of city governments are facing budget cuts. The city of Denver went through some pretty considerable layoffs where Shannon and Chief AI are operating. Would love to hear first from Shannon, from a startup perspective.
Sure.
How are you operating in this budget pressure environment? And then we'll hand it off to Steven to talk about the government perspective, how they're thinking about it. So Shannon.
Absolutely. So as you said, budgets are shrinking. Either cities aren't getting as much revenue as they expected, or they aren't getting funds from the federal government. So Denver did just go through a round of layoffs this year and shrunk their budget. And I think because Mayor Johnston is a techno-optimist, his response was, okay, so how do we use AI not to just replace more jobs, but actually just do more with less, because we have less. And so I think there are a lot of cities out there that are trying to say, this isn't about replacing jobs, it's our budgets are shrinking regardless. How do we actually really use AI to our advantage so that we can accomplish more for our citizens? So I think he actually handled it really well, and I'm hopeful that we'll see that more across the board. How that affects budgets for pilots and different things, we'll have to see how that plays out, and I'd be curious to hear from Steven on that.
Yeah, thank you. Off the top, there's a lot of uncertainty. I think one of the most difficult things about the budget process, having served before this previous administration, is we felt like at least you could wait until the next year and then a lot of these things would come up again. But specifically, there's always this chance that anything that you can do can be undone. I think when it comes to things like transportation, we are extremely hesitant to make long-term capital investments because of that, which is why we're focusing on modular, often software-based solutions. And so that's why we focused on bus prioritization as well. To Shannon's point, too, it's really how do we do more with less? And so even in San Jose, we're known as one of the most leanest staffed city halls in the entire country. And so everybody's overworked. If you look at things like our police department, we're understaffed by over 100 roles. And so even though things like automated license plate readers are extremely powerful technology that have severe civil rights implications, and we take that very seriously and we develop protocols, it's really great to see that we're able to close some of those gaps. And so in the city of San Jose, we've had a 100% solve rate for homicides for the last 3 years, in part due to this in part due to this deployment and this technology. We've also been able to recover over, I think, $3 to $4 million in stolen vehicles alone. And so it's really one of the few ways that in such a large city of 182 square miles, you can ensure folks are protected. And it's really important to start with even just focusing on specific areas. And so one thing I applaud Mayor Mahan for is he was able to wrangle the prioritization process of the budget. Previously, before his term, when we did prioritization from a budgeting perspective, we would end up picking 30 to 40 different things and it would look like a checkerboard. He really was able to get city council to focus on 5 specific areas. And so often when I'm being pitched, so my first question in my mind is, does it fall into this area? It doesn't mean that I won't elect to move forward with it, but it makes it a little bit of a harder proposition. So in the city of San Jose for the last few years, we've been focusing on increasing Public safety, decreasing street homelessness, increasing beautification, increasing housing production, and attracting investments and jobs. And so having a very clear marching orders that not only city council's aligned on, but also city staff allows us to all really critically think about what opportunities should we invest in. And I think also in terms of residents, it helps justify certain investments and certain actions, and it reduces friction to specifically be able to say, these are the focus areas across several years that we're going to be investing in, so people don't get, frankly, whiplash when we start to change rapidly what we're thinking. And so that's one of the ways that I think about budgeting. I would also add, too, I think that we built a lot of trust with our employees because we've always from the start said retention of employees and employee roles is one of the most important things. We've absolutely had hard years where we've had layoffs, such as during the pandemic and in 2008, but I really do feel like our employees know that we put them at the forefront, and when they see efforts like our upskilling programs, which are completely voluntary, nobody's arm is being twisted into doing this, I think is a really great way to show our employees that we have their back and we really put them at the forefront. So as other institutions and other companies are working them into firm KPIs saying, if you're not using AI, you're a bad employee, we really take a separate approach and say, whoever wants to learn, come on board. And even if you didn't build a GPT yourself, you could still benefit if someone in your office has used it. And so really thinking intentionally about the relationship to not only our residents, but also our employees, because they are also valued in this entire scheme is really how we've been thinking about budgeting. And yeah, there's some other thoughts.
Awesome. All right, so we have one final question for the panel. It's going to be a rapid fire question. Can each panelist give one takeaway that they hope this audience takes from the GovTech space that they can take on beyond tonight?
Why don't you start?
Okay, yeah. I've got one, and this is a little bit preaching to the choir, but if there's one thing I've learned kind of pivoting into government and GovTech, it's almost without exception, like if you're working in government, you really care. Like you're doing it because you give a shit and you want to make a difference and want to work hard. And the reputation government leaders get is so the opposite and so wildly and almost angeringly so undeserved. And so one thing I've been trying to do more is when people kind of dunk on the government, been like, no, dude, that's off. I'll give you an example. I was in line at the airport the other day going through security, like lining up for security. And it was an inefficient system and like 2 baggage claims or whatever, get in one line. And some dude just says, classic government job. You know what I mean? So that's the classic inefficient, horrible, like nonsense. And what did I do? I slunk away like a coward. But I vowed that day not to do that next time. And I hope you will do the same. Learn from my mistakes and cowardice. Sorry.
Hard to follow up with that. I think that it's a really exciting time to be building for government. It's a really exciting time to be investing in government. It's really an exciting time, and it's sort of the third precipice of transformation between cloud adoption and sort of 2011 and the pandemic, which digitized a bunch of things, and now we have AI and like whatever Doge is and a bunch of other things that are scary and on our doorstep, and that government's really proactively looking for solutions and partners for. And in 15 years of doing this, it's never felt riper for transformation. It's never felt riper for these conversations. And if you're smart and you can solve a really niche problem, I think there's a market for you. So my takeaway is like, keep building. This is really exciting.
One thing I would offer is that risk tolerance is extremely variable when it comes to local governments. I think that if you are a municipality with more than, let's say, 2,000 people, if you do try to implement AI, things will probably go wrong at some point. But once they do, and you realize that the sky isn't falling, and hopefully you're not voted out because you didn't do anything too bad, I think that there's a lot of good that comes from that. And I think that one reason why San Jose is successful is that we've taken our licks, frankly. There have been things we've absolutely bumped our head on and not gotten right, but we've always been honest and transparent. We've been trying to be much more proactively when we deploy things. I've personally witnessed when we've had conversations about ALPR, just abject, complete fear. But when we specifically sit down and talk about people in terms of retention policies and auditing, a lot of that fear goes away, and people actually start talking about, hey, you should put it on this corner because I drive past here every day and here's what I observe as a resident. And so in my mind, a lot of jurisdictions can really move forward with adoption when they co-create with their communities, but that can only happen when unfortunately you take a few bumps. And so if you could really just have some empathy, I think, for that problem, ask them about times when things have gone right or wrong and provide some assurances that you will be there with them as a good partner and help them see around some of those corners, I think you're going to be better off from it.
Amazing. Building on something Stephen said earlier, tactical advice, a lot of government leaders put out the list of their priorities. So, you can go city by city and see like, here are the top 5 priorities that they're trying to accomplish in 2026. Go watch their state of the city, their state of the state. And you can actually go then know who your target audience is and what they're trying to accomplish and put everything toward that goal. Like, here's how I'm gonna help you accomplish this goal by the end of the year. So that's like a tactical piece of advice. And then I just double down on find your champion. Like, go spend time with people, go sit in their offices. I think they'd be excited to have you out there and just learning what they're doing and seeing how you could help them. And there's nothing better than really having that customer, that partner, that person that you're working with and seeing their eyes light up when they get to do something new and cool. So just lean in. We need more people in GovTech. It's so inspiring to see all the people in this room.
Awesome. Let's give a quick hand to the panel. All right. We have some hands and some questions. We'll run the mic.
Yes, hi. EJ Jarvis. Stephen, nice to see you again outside of San Jose. This is actually a question for Shannon and Rachel. So I was at Stanford for SF Tech Week in the Y2E2 room. And someone posed the question, the conversation was about freedom of the press and all that stuff, more so on an educational standpoint. But looking at it from a private and public standpoint, questions, far out there, but from that standpoint, how would you, make something as crazy as making Washington, D.C. the 51st state from a public and private standpoint? What would be the steps to sort of do that? I know you mentioned security, so would love to hear both your thoughts on that.
Is your question, how do we make Washington, D.C. the 51st state?
That was the question someone posed at Stanford. I'm not that smart. But they posed it as an educational standpoint. But, I think that the door has been open for more private and public partnerships. So would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Wild out there.
Take it? Sure.
Europe is really far ahead of us in terms of public-private partnership, comfort and ease. And the most successful, I call them P3s, PPPs, public-private partnership, follow with me now, in my experience, have tended to be around infrastructure and sort of privatizing think of toll roads, privatizing toll roads, putting a lot of investment in from the private sector to that infrastructure because, frankly, the public sector just doesn't necessarily have the resources to uphold and maintain over long periods of time and or necessarily innovate to the level that they might want to over the next 30 years. In terms of making the DC the 51st state, that feels unrealistic to me, only because, why? But come at me afterwards. We can have a longer discussion. Yeah, of course, everyone's taxed without representation. I got the license plate, I got it. But I'm just saying, I'm not sure what problem that solves necessarily. And right now, for me, public-private partnerships are all around what problems do they solve right now. What can't be solved right now, and how does that lay the groundwork for future sort of government cohesion and planning and strategy? So I think there's a lot of nice to haves with government transformation, but I'm really only seeing implementation of the must-haves right now.
I think it's interesting. There's a lot of really innovative models out there right now. People are trying and testing different things. So the job I had right before I came out to California was I was on the founding team of America's Frontier Fund. And we were raising private capital to try and help the government invest in critical technologies and make that investment go farther. So we would do things, we had a nonprofit arm advocate for the CHIPS Act to be passed. And then we would raise private capital to say, if the government's investing here, how do we 10x that investment and use the power of the bottom-up venture community in the United States to really do that. So there's a lot of interesting models going on right now. The largest LP of that fund, at least at the time, was the state of New Mexico. So there, it is interesting to see where public and private markets and partners are coming together. And I'm excited for where it can go because we don't have that top-down model in the US, right? We have the bottoms-up innovation, which is amazing in so many ways, but also means that large institutions like government sometimes are moving a little slower.
Rex, I think you're picking.
Yeah, whoever's closest, sorry.
Thanks for the panel. Great stuff. I have a question about something that hasn't come up, which I think is unique to GovTech, which is elections, right? Elections happen, administrations change. I think in the grand scheme of things, that's a very good thing for society. But I'm wondering from a product launch and relationship building perspective, what are your thoughts on that? And maybe even on the positive side of maybe that has opportunities and why not?
Yeah, great question. And the reason Rachel patted me on the back is because before Rept worked with like local government staff, like municipalities, we supported political campaigns and elected officials. So it was kind of, and those are kind of cousin markets and disciplines. There's some differences, but so we have a kind of a background in that. I think generally this is like a really good thing for that space and for those who want to like run for office. If you want to socialize a platform, if you want to socialize like an idea, now you have so many great tools at your disposal to build them out, create them, spread them quickly. You know what I mean? And to me, I just think that even it's just like local government kind of generally, like municipalities, it's an underserved market too, right? The reason we built Rept initially for campaigns was it actually was COVID, it was 2020, and people are used to like knocking on doors to campaign, and no one could do that anymore. So Rept became like a digital door knocking solution, and it worked really well, and that's the kind of approach that can scale pretty quickly, especially with a lot of these technologies. So I think generally speaking, it's I think that much like other kind of sector parts of the space, I think electeds stand to benefit, whether it's organizing their campaigns, keeping residents informed, like showcasing all the positive work they're doing to shatter that myth that governments don't care. I think this is like a very good moment for that, and the positives way outweigh the negatives.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, good question. The only thing I would add to that is just sometimes elected officials have the shortest tenure in the sense that many people stay on, right? So I've been able to serve for 2 mayoral administrations. City managers often serve 10, 20 years specifically in their roles. And often people will move up also. So I came in as an innovation advisor, now I lead innovation and budget portfolio. So understand too that even if you're focused on the person at the top and the elected official, a lot of the underlying hierarchy and below can also be there much longer than even that elected official serves their jurisdiction.
I would say in terms of venture backability, it's really hard to build a venture backable company that's serving campaigns or like political discourse, mostly because it becomes partisan very, very quickly. And so you're artificially capped in terms of where your company can go. I agree with you that it's an important time, an important thing to be innovating in. But as you think about scaling a business, it's very hard to find venture backing for it. Wah wah.
So I think we have time for 2 more questions. So Mega, you could.
Oh yeah, that's come here. Hi everyone, my name is Arjun, like Argentina without the Tina. I have a question for Rachel and Stephen. Stephen, you really sold San Jose, but I'm really happy in San Francisco for now. My question to you guys from an investor perspective as well as a representative of City, how are you dealing with micromobility, the electric bicycles, electric scooters? There's a huge surge in not only the adoption of the industry, but such a lack of regulation, legislation, even safety standards. And if you look over in Europe, countries like Netherlands have licensing and registrations and are so much further. And obviously I'm asking from a selfish point of view. We are building an insurance and navigation platform called Helmet. And so I would love to get your two cents on that topic. Thank you.
Absolutely, great question. One thing that might surprise a lot of people in the room, especially if you don't work in the space of autonomous vehicles, is that in California, individual cities have no right to actually prohibit or modify the way that they operate. They need 2 permits. One is specifically from the California DMV, and the other is for the California Public Utilities Commission. And so what's really interesting is that there is no such thing as local control, essentially, and so that power lies within the state. And so when it comes to certain things like autonomous transportation, cities actually have radically less power than often people think. There has been some certain suggested legislation to change that, but that is currently the state of play. Another thing I would just say is that when it comes to micromobility, I think that there was a lot of shock and awe when you had the deployment of, let's say, bird scooters and things like that. When I was in law school, I had a colleague who was working in, I believe it was Houston at the time, I may get that wrong, but specifically I remember she said, Stephen, we were able to pass an ordinance before they dumped thousands of scooters on our streets, right? And I just remember thinking, so interesting how it was. One day there was no scooters and the next there was so many. And so I think that inviting local jurisdictions to partner with you on deployment, safety, making sure the right of way is not being blocked, especially for folks in wheelchairs and other types of, let's say, physical disabilities is so crucial. And you can very quickly become an adversary within your first week if you don't have those conversations. So I would almost say approach it from number one, just because you can doesn't mean you should use that shock and awe approach, or really have a collaborative conversation. I appreciate that Waymo is potentially moving into San Jose, and they had a lot of conversations conversations with us very early on. And I think that really helps soften the relationship and make them feel much more like a collaborator. And so that's one of the reasons that Mayor Mahan has been a big supporter of that. I would say when it comes to a city like San Jose, just understand how service area plays a role into this. We have such a large, wide city of 182 square miles. We really invest in not only improving, again, buses and that middle mile connection. I would say the last mile, I hate to say it, but in many ways it becomes a little bit of a personal responsibility, and it shouldn't be like that. But going back to the budget conversation, some of our largest investments are, again, in that centralized middle mile and not necessarily last mile. But we're always looking at ways that we can get people connected, because we do have very strong 2030 climate goals, and absolutely individual transportation plays into that.
I think from an investment perspective, and I'll be quick on this because it's relatively niche, but happy to talk longer on it. But the market feels pretty saturated to me, like e-bikes, be e-bikes, be e-bikes. It's hard for me to know the difference between them. Again, come at me after the conversation. But I just think it's hard to differentiate in the investment scope. I think the winners to me are those who are working directly with cities and states to implement policies into their own technology, like where you can drive, where you can park, some sort of fee or fine structure for people that aren't in compliance, that level of proactivity. Having worked on both the Bird and the Lyft initiatives across the country, I can tell you that I think scooters in a lot of ways are a scourge on cities because they're just stuff everywhere. And until there were companies like Lime really willing to do the policy into their technology, I think it actually was bad for cities. So happy to have a longer conversation about it, but not a space that I'm playing in, but looking at a lot of curb management solutions, which I think is sort of the next iteration of micromobility and broader mobility, which is how are you utilizing existing physical infrastructure to maximize for last mile.
Hey there, Lauren Taylor, former council member in Oakland, also an engineer turned management consultant, supporting organizations to actually change given the current environment, including adoption of AI. But one of the things that I've noticed, you mentioned the revenues in cities. Revenues are declining. I know that our city's revenue primarily come from property taxes. So we're still in an agrarian economy when there have been like at least 3 or 4 revolutions since then in terms of how we as society make money and really the value that gets created. What can AI do to help local governments particularly increase our revenue model, how we drive revenue to actually serve the public good, because we're getting left behind as local municipalities if we're based on the agrarian economy when we now have the analytics economy and everything else that's creating all of the value that we need to keep up with.
When I think about looking at companies, and I'm, again, going to be fast on this, I really like companies that are either revenue generating and rev sharing. So as you think about building, how do you create value from assets that cities already have and sort of maximize for them? Or how do you minimize for costs and then share in the money saved? This idea that like your fate is in some ways tied to the city's fates and your efficiencies and benefits created, I think both makes the sales cycle easier, but also allows people to find money between the couch cushions in a time where it feels like the wallet is really contracting. Anyone want to speak to that?
I'm just curious, wasn't there? Oh, did you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to mention I've probably seen 10 different GovTech startups that are focused on faster permitting times, and the premise is that if you can get permits out faster, then you can then, have happier residents, but also increase the revenues. But yeah, it's a good question. It's one I don't think about daily, but I think it's pretty thought provoking. So, is there anyone else? Yes, Stephen, to bring us home, and then we'll move to our reception.
Better be good.
I'll do my best. So, honest opinion, I think there's a non-technical answer and there's a technical answer. In my personal opinion, I believe that there's a lot of difficult conversations around taxes that we need to have. I would offer to you that there's certain things like cable tax where cities used to get $20, $30 million a year. That's completely gone now, right? And as someone who has multiple streaming accounts, the last thing I would want is a tax, but if that cities are losing out on that revenue, it's vital. Also, in terms of EVs, they pay a lower amount of, let's say, gas tax when it comes to maintaining our roads and our infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of non-technical conversations we need to have about replacing some of that revenue and adapting it to the modern society. On a technical basis, one thing that would excite me is if we could break out of this annual budgeting cycle and have at least certain pockets of funding that is deployed in a more agile way. And so if we can think about localized districts like businesses, how can we give them the power and the control to be able to dictate what resources they need instead of us throwing a dart at a board once a year? I think that Web3 originally gave a little bit of promise to that in terms of just having these more democratic allocations of resources, but that faded away a little bit. But I think if we can find ways to be able to reach impact and reach the needs that individuals and also just communities have, I think we're going to be better off. So I would love to see ways that we can deploy resources and funds specifically to address those like local challenges.
I was going to say too, I think it is an important question because oftentimes when you're working with governments, you're measuring impact, and that impact can be kind of amorphous, right? Like, did I help this person today? Did we work toward our goals? You know, is my relationship with somebody stronger because we had that meeting with them? And so it's something we're actively working on, is trying to figure out actually, how do you measure the impact you're having, and can you tie that to revenue and not just time saved? Because I think time saved is kind of like the first step that a lot of GovTech companies have taken, but how can we go that step further? And I think that, you know, we work with the private sector as well, and it's so different because their bottom line is revenue and not just their bottom line being impact. But it is an important conversation to have because that's how we've found ourselves in this position where governments aren't operating with the same efficiency that the private sector is. So I love that we ended on this question. And honestly, if you have ideas for this too, like, come talk to us. I think anybody in this room, please come talk to us afterwards. Like, we're growing at Chief, we're hiring. I'm sure, you know, everybody here is like looking for top talent and just more ideas. So we'd love to talk about how we can do these things. We don't have every answer. Yeah.
All right, with that, let's give another round of applause for the panel. And there are refreshments and snacks over on this side, so we'll keep this going until around 8 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Yeah. Good job. Good job. Good job.
Yeah.
We'll take a group.